evening again, and welcome to the 72nd Annual Convention of the American Humanist Association. I trust, whoa, I guess I wasn't loud enough. I trust you are enjoying the, is that? I trust you are enjoying the conversations around you and making new friends. To me, that is always the best part of a banquet. Over the years, I have found that sometimes the food is amazing, and sometimes not so much. I'm gonna fix this sound. Sometimes the speakers are good. They hold your attention, and they're wonderful. Sometimes, not so much. But the company at the table is always amazing. The person sitting next to you is always good. And if nothing else, they are a fellow traveler. They're on this secular path with you and with us. And for that, we are very grateful. We're always happy to have new people sharing the road with us. So banquets are also about getting to know people. And I've been asked to share a little bit about me. I was born in New York City. I'm a New Yorker. And I continued to cling to that identity for decades after my family moved me to Colorado. I went kicking and screaming. I think I was about 8 years old. I cried for months. I missed New York. To me, Colorado was a place I was passing through. It wasn't my home. Times change, and so eventually Colorado did become my home. And part of what made that move difficult was that at my New York elementary school, we said the Pledge of Allegiance the right way. And the elementary school in Colorado Springs said it the new and improved way. It didn't feel right to me then, and it doesn't feel right to me now. In New York, as in Colorado, my parents spent a good portion of their free time at the Unitarian Church. My parents set the model for me of active, constructive involvement in my community. I suspect it was my mother who taught me the phrase, "If it is to be, it's up to me." She was full of those sayings, and she lived by them. Do unto others, to thine own self be true, waste not, want not, the inherent worth and dignity of each person, and so on. I became a follower of Marian and Paul Hale, humanists to their core. I cannot tell you a tale of great revelation or epiphany when I came to my position of disbelief, because I didn't go on that journey. Many of you did, and for that I honor you. I do not know if I would have been able to make that journey without the guidance I had. I was lucky, I was free, born of religion. In junior high and high school, I was involved in the church youth program, the infamous LRY. Stands for Liberal Religious Youth, and the Unitarians shut it down a couple decades ago because I guess we had too much fun. But it was fun. I was president of the Colorado Springs group. I loved the LRY. It was my safe haven. I suspect that that is how my daughter feels about her camp quest, which we will hear a little bit about later. My first solo road trip was less than a week after I earned my driver's license. I borrowed my parents' Ford Falcon station wagon, and drove to an LRY conference in Albuquerque, New Mexico. I had very trusting parents. Those were the days long before cell phones. And I was instructed, when I got to Raton, I had to call. When I got to Santa Fe, I had to call. When I got to Albuquerque, I had to call. I applied my education in the real world. Oh, I skipped a part. This is so boring. I'm sorry for you. I dropped out of high school to attend the new community college in Colorado Springs. It was there I became vice president of the student body because I didn't yet fully understand feminism. I aimed my future husband at the position of president, and I took the proper place of vice president. Forgive me, Gary, I grew up between now and then. I moved on to college, completing a double major in environmental studies and cultural anthropology, and moved on to a master's program in public administration. I applied my education in the real world by returning to New York and becoming a real estate developer. Then Washington State, where I became a resort manager. Now don't laugh, I really did use that MPA program. I got that real estate development done in record time. They came to us when we were all finished with it, and they said, we want to know who you paid to get through the red tape. And I told them, we didn't pay anybody. We did hire the right attorney, but we found out what the laws were, and we just followed all the laws. So we didn't cheat. After that, then we did the resort management in Washington State, and then back to Colorado to work for the same community college where I had left high school to attend. While at the college, Gary and I became alarmed at the religious activity that was becoming more and more active in Colorado and Colorado Springs. The same high school group that had nourished me as a teen was still running, no longer under the heading of LRY, but Gary and I took turns running it. One of the girls in it was on a swim team, one of the northern school districts, and when she asked to please be excused from the prayer before the meet, the coach said yes. He sat her on the bench, and he didn't let her swim again. She wasn't a team player. Then we had the rise of Amendment 2, which took the civil liberties away from gays and lesbians. Gary and I were beside ourselves, so we took action, just like any good humanist does. We started the Free Thinkers of Colorado Springs, and shortly after that, Evolve Fish. We discovered the AHA a few years later, and I was asked to run for the board about 9 years ago. It's been a really interesting journey, especially these last 9 years. One of those special places for me was the Unitarian Universalist LRY program, but LRY no longer exists. Our secular community has created a special haven for our children. It's called Camp Quest. Tonight, I have the pleasure of introducing David Diskin. David is the president of Camp Quest West. He's a lead organizer for the Sacramento Core and for the Sacramento Free Thought Day. He has been an activist in the movement since 2009, when there was a legal challenge to a city council invocation before meetings in Lodi, California. David?
Thank you so much. I want to start by thanking the AHA for allowing Camp Quest to have a presence this weekend at your annual conference, and also to all the parents who've entrusted your kids to us for the weekend. It makes it a blast for us to attend and bring in the volunteers, and I think it hopefully makes it a little bit more easier for you guys to manage as well, letting your kids hang out with us for the weekend. Oh, there we go. Is it? A little minor technical problem. We had a napkin over the projector. That's okay. So I wanted to start just by letting everybody know a little bit about what Camp Quest does. And first, let's talk about location. How many people here are from California? Representing, all right, great. We have 2 locations in California. One of them is just north of Sacramento, and the other one is in Southern California, just north of Riverside, in a little ski resort area called Wrightwood. And we didn't stop there. Of course, Camp Quest dates back way before California. We have about a dozen locations throughout the United States and 2 more in the United Kingdom. And I'm really thrilled to announce for those of you in Colorado that we're going to be opening up next summer right over there. Arizona, Seattle, we got the West Coast pretty well covered, maybe even Oregon pretty soon. But Camp Quest is an amazing thing, especially here in California, the camp that I manage. Last year, in our 2 camps combined, we had, there's our dates for this summer. There we go. Last year, for our 2 camps combined, we had 128 kids between the ages of 8 and 17 attend our camps, Northern and Southern California, which is up from about 30% from the year prior. And I'm really thrilled to announce, although our registration isn't quite done, that we're up another 30% from 2012, which is really great. And it's not just California that's doing this. This is every camp throughout the United States. Thanks to you guys and your support. For those of you who don't know much about Camp Quest, just to give you a quick run over, we are an all-American, outdoor, fun, exciting camp. We do the traditional outdoor stuff like archery, swimming, hiking, looking up at the stars, the campfires, the s'mores, the songs, everything else like that. But we combine that with science, with the concepts of humanism and free thought. We talk about peer review and the scientific method, and we bring it all together in a really fun package that takes an entire week, and we entertain those kids. They get an opportunity to make new friends. And I want to say that for those of you who come from more rural areas, it's a little difficult when you're a non-believer, when you're a free thinker, when you're a humanist, to make friends, especially if you're in that area that comes from a lot of, well, you know what I'm talking about, the conservative areas throughout California, throughout the United States. And so this gives those kids an opportunity to make friends who maybe don't live next door, but certainly somewhere within the vicinity. We are the ages are 8 through 17. We also have a teen leadership program for kids that are 15, 16, and 17. But what I think really shines about camp in general is that if you've been to camp, you know this. Not only is it a place to make friends, but it's also a place to discover yourself and to kind of find out what you're all about as a kid. And we're really thrilled to give kids that opportunity while learning about science and experiencing the great outdoors. Our theme for 2013 for this year's summer is to take the reins. We're going to be talking about empowerment. We're going to be talking about taking the initiative, taking action when they see things happening that shouldn't be happening, whether that's bullying or church-state separation or anything else across the board. We're inspired by folks like Jessica Alquist and Zach Copeland who've done that already, and we want to continue that tradition with the kids that we bring into Camp Quest. I want to invite everybody on Sunday afternoon to join us. We're going to have a special meet and greet. If you have kids, bring them. Otherwise, just come and say hi. We're going to have our counselors there, kids, families, at 1:30 to 3:30. We're going to talk about what we do in a little bit more detail, Q&A, show some videos as well. We are down in the very first floor in the same building in room 612. We'll have refreshments, and if you can't make it then at 1:30 on Saturday, just come and see us pretty much any time. Again, I want to thank you guys so much for allowing Camp Quest to be here this weekend. Camp Quest, we're fun, we're friends, we're free thought, we're beyond belief. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Please remember, send your kids, your grandchildren, neighborhood kids, whoever, to Camp Quest. This is an evening of a little good news and a little bad news. Most of you are aware of our bad news. Richard Leakey is unable to attend this evening. Even though he very much wanted to come, his doctors didn't want to let him out of Africa.
Good evening. I'm with...
See, he's so anxious. He's going to step on his introduction. Dr. Leakey is not able to join us. He is ill and could not travel. He was to receive the Isaac Asimov Science Award for playing a vital role in creating a more humanistic society as a politician, paleoanthropologist, and conservationist. Dr. Leakey was well enough to prepare a wonderful short video for us. Let's watch.
Good evening. I'm Richard Leakey, normally resident in Kenya. I've been in Stony Brook, New York for the last month, and I'd really hoped to be with you this evening. Sadly, I've been unwell, and I'm awaiting a transplant of my liver later in the year, and the doctors have advised against international long-distance travel. So here we are, I can't be with you. First, I'd like to say how grateful I am and how honored I am to be the recipient of the Isaac Asimov Science Award. This is a real honor, and I've long been a supporter of the humanists and rationalists of the world, and I can't think of anything that gives me more pleasure than to be recognized by one of the key players in this rationalist battle of the modern age. I'm obviously deeply concerned about many issues, and I think unless we can persuade more people to be more rational, we are a doomed species. Whilst I think religion plays a critical role in causing war and current problems, and we see this in the Middle East, and we see this in other areas, it hardly threatens the species that one group of people may try to annihilate another group of people. But far more serious is the question of climate change. Climate change could make this world uninhabitable by the majority of human beings. The only way we're going to deal with climate change is for society, scientists, leaders, politicians, and others to recognize that we are facing a massive crisis, and it takes massive response by everybody if we're going to avoid what I think is on its way. So, talking reasonably and scientifically to people is one thing, but if they've got a closed mind because they are not persuaded of rationalism, I don't know where we're going. So I would urge that we do much more to persuade young people in particular that whilst you can have whatever faith you like, and you can believe in whatever makes you comfortable, there is a scientific basis to everything that we see, and a particular need to interpret that science for the benefit of our future. Thank you, and I'm again sorry I can't be with you.
What a thrill that would have been for us. It was so nice of him to take his limited energies and time and make that for us. Now, the first of the good news. We have with us tonight Arizona Representative Juan Mendez. With that applause, it hardly feels like I need to go on with this introduction. You all know who he is. Mr. Mendez made news just over a week ago when he presented the opening invocation, or non-invocation, to the Arizona House of Representatives. Mr. Mendez is a first-generation American, quite young, serving in his first term. He set the House on its heels when, following his conscience, like every good humanist does, implored the people he works with instead of God, to focus on doing the right thing. In fact, in the last few weeks, we have seen two humanists publicly affirm that their values and source of inspiration is held within themselves and their fellow humans. So tonight, we are honored to have Mr. Juan Mendez, state representative from Arizona, to share his experiences with us. Juan, please join us.
Rebecca, thank you for that introduction. I need to thank a couple more people before we get started. I need to thank the American Humanist Association for this opportunity to be here. This is an awesome space. I can feel all you guys in this room. And thank you to the Secular Coalition for Arizona and Sarah Belaine for your work to develop and organize non-theistic communities in my state, for ensuring the state legislature is informed about this active, growing constituency, and for collaborating with me on publicly articulating my humanist values. This past week and a half has been pretty remarkable whirlwind, with some remarkably positive stories about non-theists. The national media attention around the humanist invocation I offered on the floor of the Arizona House of Representatives, the Pope's remarks about overlooking religious differences to focus on good works, and the humbling admission on national television of Rebecca Vitzmu, a tornado survivor, that she is an atheist. And the incredible media around these events has given all of us unprecedented possibilities. We have a real voice right now, which means we have the opportunity and I believe the responsibility to use this momentum to drive a continuing public discourse around the need to emphasize shared values in order to do shared service across religious and ideological lines. I hope, with all this positive publicity, I hope we've created a space in which we can all speak openly and authentically about our humanism in a way that is engaging and inspiring. And in this space, I think we will finally be heard in ways we never could have imagined, even 5 years ago. So, too many people feel disenfranchised from civic engagement and social justice work because they don't see their values articulated by their government representatives, their community leaders, their neighbors, or their friends. And so now, with the spotlight on us, now is the time to boldly advance this message that humanist values are relevant and resonate for everyone, regardless of religious belief or non-belief. Now is the time, with the light of the media on us and with the groundswell of support for us and interest in the humanist lifestyle, now is the time for us to mobilize our communities for political advocacy. Now is the time to respond to our community's antagonizing political culture and regressive policies, to respond with humanizing, connecting language and progressive policies that create opportunities for everyone, to thrive, to provide for their families, to live joyful, free, actualized lives. Now is the time for us to reject complacency, because humanism affirms people as infinitely precious, and we cannot affirm the preciousness of human life when we choose not to respond when our government is stripping away the human rights of the most vulnerable among us. When people are imprisoned in a cycle of poverty that crushes the human spirit, distorts human perception around what is even possible for us, and then fragments the human family into distinct classes of privilege and of want. When people are alone and disconnected from one another because they haven't heard about our humanist communities or their transformative power. When people are treated like things because they are born on the wrong side of an arbitrary geographical line. When people are physically diminished by illness or disability because we refuse to invest in providing universal health care, which ought to be understood as a basic human right, we must respond. And so I'm so grateful for the work of the people in this room, what you have done to advance the humanist message, to build communities, to create a culture that made it possible for me, as a state legislator in Arizona, to talk honestly about what I believe in. And now together we can go forward further than we ever imagined. We're standing at a moment in history where truly we can dramatically shift our culture toward feminism, environmentalism, human dignity, and real liberty and justice for all. And so I will not stop fighting for these values. And this last week and a half has shown me that I am not fighting alone. Together, if we choose to be bold and speak the truth, if we choose to be champions of humanism, if we choose to seize this moment, we will win. And what we will win is the infinite precious dignity of all humanity. Thank you.
Thank you, Juan. I can't see to the end of the room, but I can see the future. I see a humanist president. One that will stay that way. Sorry about that. I'm a little unhappy. I'd like to introduce you now to Dr. Marty Klein. Most of you have, many of you sat in his session this afternoon. Some of you heard him last year. He is a licensed marriage and family therapist, policy analyst, and certified sex therapist. He may be AHA's modern-day Dr. Ruth. He didn't put that in this bio, I did. Marty is a forensic expert who has testified or consulted on many national obscenity and anti-censorship cases. He is an award-winning author of 7 books, including America's War on Sex, The Attack, War, that's not right. The Attack, War, Lust, and Liberty? The Attack on War, Lust, and Liberty, okay. Which has a foreword by Nadine Strassen, who we gave an award to a few years ago. The book details how the religious right uses their power to undermine our secular democracy. Marty was a very popular presenter last year in New Orleans, and that's how he earned the big room this afternoon. This afternoon he spoke on sexual intelligence, 10 things humanists need to know about sex. I am sure it was well attended, as humanists tend to be lifelong learners. We're always looking for more information. In 1986, Marty was the first American writer to question the concept of sexual addiction. He has continued to write about it. So 16 years later, when appearing on a national panel with the sex addiction discoverer, inventor, proponent, Patrick Carnes, he was introduced as the Antichrist. So he belongs here, right? He's one of us. He recently authored an article on sex addiction in The Humanist. After reading this article, Dan Savage, who will be introduced by Marty. We know a couple things about Dan Savage just from that. We know Dan Savage reads The Humanist. Anyway, he contacted Marty and invited him to discuss the topic of Marty's article on his podcast. He said that it made him feel sane. Isn't that interesting? Just a few words can help a person feel more comfortable in his own skin. Marty's article has gone a long way. It's done many things for us, and we are so glad that it appeared in our magazine, because that shows the good work that our magazine, The Humanist, does. I am happy to turn the mic over to Dr. Marty Klein.
Thank you, Rebecca, for that completely accurate introduction. Can you please turn that laptop toward me so I know what I'm talking about? Thank you. Of course, it's so far, and I'm so old. Now, that's not what it's supposed to look like, is it? Dan, that's a very old picture of you. While we're getting set up, I want to thank Christopher Ryan, the author of Sex at Dawn. And if you have not read that book, stop listening to me. Go buy it right now. Christopher Ryan, the author of Sex at Dawn, who, as we say in Yiddish, arranged the shidduch with me and Dan Savage. For you non-Jews, that means he facilitated the interface. Facilitated the interface between me and Dan, and I was thrilled to hear from Dan through Christopher. So thank you, Christopher. And I really do mean it's a wonderful book, Sex at Dawn. The only problem with it is that it has sold way more copies than all of my books put together. No. And I worked so hard to get this talk down to the amount of time they gave me. This is not coming out of my 5 minutes. The clock does not start until we've got my slide up there. So a rabbi, a priest, and a minister walk into a bar. A rabbi, a priest, and a minister walk into a bar, and the bartender says, "What is this, a joke?" Well, a French guy, an Italian guy. That might be it. Yeah. It works for me. Thank you. It takes a village. It takes a village. The Humanist of the Year Award was established to recognize a public figure who, through the application of humanist values, has made a significant contribution to the improvement of the human condition. Over the last half-century, we have honored an astounding group of people, scientists, writers, political activists, some of your personal heroes, some of mine. And the question is, why does Dan Savage belong in this group? And we can find the answer to this question in Dan's own words. I want to pick up the story in Dan's late adolescence. And he says, "The realization that I was gay came about the same time I entered a Catholic high school for boys who were becoming priests. It was a bit like realizing you're an alcoholic on your first day of work at a Budweiser plant." Now, when Dan first came out to his friends, he did not come out as gay, however. He came out as bisexual. And he said, "I told my friends I was bisexual because I was afraid. I didn't think that they could handle the truth, and I knew that I couldn't handle living without friends. So I lied." And this is the beginning of Dan's journey in explaining to us that good people sometimes lie. It's not just bad people who lie, it's good people who lie also. And Dan's been investigating this question and helping the rest of us have a little bit more compassion for ourselves and each other when we find ourselves in difficult circumstances. Fast forward a little bit, and over the course of the last few years, Dan has been challenging the narrative of monogamy. More compassion coming out of this man, more compassion. He's an advice columnist, and in one case he said, after 20 years, this guy doesn't find his wife attractive anymore, so he loses desire for her. He doesn't have an affair, he just loses desire because he wants to stay with her. And Dan Savage says, and I'm supposed to criticize this guy? A lot of compassion for this guy. He says, if someone truly loves their spouse, if someone has kids and they've tried counseling, they've tried everything, maybe it's better for a person to cheat than to leave. That's how much Dan believes in marriage. That's how much Dan believes in loyalty. Dan says, you know, if you've been with someone for 20 or 30 years and your spouse only cheats on you once or twice, your spouse isn't bad at monogamy. Your spouse is good at monogamy. And that's not funny. That's serious. That's really serious stuff. If the marriage counseling industry, of which I am part, if the therapy industry would pay more attention to this man's heart, it would revolutionize the industry. So Dan says, what's the one thing that I'm not supposed to suggest in a situation like this? In a situation where someone's having trouble being sexually faithful to someone, maybe that someone doesn't want to have sex with their own spouse anymore. What is that person supposed to do? I see cases like this in my practice all the time. Somebody wants to have sex twice a year, somebody wants to have sex twice a week, they're married to each other. What is the person supposed to do? Dan says we should place a higher value on marital stability than on marital monogamy. It's a revolutionary idea. Moving along, Dan's been in the center of the marriage equality fight. And I don't know if you've been paying attention, but that is not a fight for the faint-hearted. It's a fight where everyone's playing hardball. This is a case in which Dan has been playing to win. And here's a picture of Dan and his husband, or his pre-husband, right, getting married. Then 5 minutes later, this is his husband, Terry. Apparently, Terry looks great in a Speedo. Dan keeps telling me. This is Dan and Terry at a gay pride event. Dan, we're going to let people vote on which outfit they like better here. Now, this is former Senator Rick Santorum. Rick Santorum has also been involved in the marriage equality fight. And not only did Mr. Santorum suggest that he disapproved of same-gender marriage, he famously equated same-gender marriage with bestiality and pedophilia. To which Dan Savage responded by creating the Google Santorum campaign. This is a screenshot. And this is an amazing thing. This is an amazing thing. And if the internet is not just a passing fad, this material is going to be on the internet approximately until the end of time. So what Dan did was with the cooperation of a lot of his readers, was he created a new definition for the word Santorum, and it became so popular that it actually, if you Google Santorum's name, for over 10 years, it was the first thing that came up, and Mr. Santorum's campaign came up second. And the really amazing thing about that, the really amazing thing about that is if you look at the screenshot, look at what it says. It says Santorum's problem started when the then senator compared homosexuality to bestiality and pedophilia. That's going to be on the website. That's going to be on the web. If Mr. Santorum chooses to run for president in 2016, he's going to have some questions about this. And that's what Dan Savage has accomplished on behalf of all of us. Continuing with Dan Savage's profound level of compassion for people, he and his husband Terry started the It Gets Better campaign. Hearing about young people who are being bullied, hearing about young people who are feeling hopeless, some of them even killing themselves, what to do. Again, using extraordinary media savvy to implement his sense of compassion. They started the It Gets Better campaign. They put a video on the web saying, hey, my life was horrible when I was your age. It worked out pretty well for me. This is my husband. Tell him, honey. And they invited people to send in their stories. They got over 50,000 videos, including videos from Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, Ellen DeGeneres, some popular entertainers. I have no idea who they are. Office staffs at various corporations, they got together, they did videos to tell young people, your life may suck right now, but trust me, it gets better. Making a full circle, Dan talks about his journey through Catholicism, and he says, you know, at the time, my intuitive sense that the church was wrong about homosexuality and me led me to wonder what else the church might be wrong about. And it didn't take long, he says, to arrive at the biggest doubt of all, the existence of God. And that's what makes humanism the most dangerous idea on earth, because it challenges people to ask questions, and it challenges people to examine received wisdom, and it challenges people to rise up against institutions that have a deadening effect. And that's why Dan fully deserves to join these other amazing people as the 2013 Humanist of the Year.
Thank you all so much. You know, when I look at the list of all the amazing people who've been the Humanist of the Year, Jonas Salk, Barbara Ehrenreich, P.Z. Meyer, Richard Dawkins, and then see my name on top of it, it just looks to me as if you've run out of people to give it to. And I have to remind myself that's because I'm Catholic. Still a little culturally Catholic. Years ago, when Ann Landers passed away, a radio station invited me to come on and talk about her work, her legacy, what she did and how she changed the culture. And they also invited on Margot Howard, who is Ann Landers' daughter, who's also an advice columnist now. And I was supposed to be the radical, swear word using, butt sex approving advice columnist who would shit on Ann Landers' legacy and say that she was full of it. On the radio with her grieving daughter. That was the plan, according to the producers. And I actually grew up reading Ann Landers, and I loved Ann Landers. I even loved her when she was wrong, which I hope my readers feel about me, that they can love me even when I'm wrong, as I am sometimes. And I got to be friends with Margot, and after, a couple years later, there was an auction of Ann Landers' effects. They were going to auction off all of her possessions, her belongings, the things that Margot didn't keep as mementos. And one of the things that was being auctioned off was her desk, the desk at which she had written her column for 40 years. And so I took some money out of the bank and went to the auction, expecting that I would be bidding against the Smithsonian, that they would want this desk, and they would put it in the Smithsonian next to Archie Bunker's chair. But first I called Margot and I said, is this okay if I go buy your mother's desk? Because it will be spun as if I am insulting your mother's memory, because there are people who hate me, and they will spin anything I do in a negative way. And she said, no, my mother would love to keep her desk in the business. Go get it. Which is how Margot talks. And I'm embarrassed to say how much money I took with me. I took $10,000 in cash, thinking I'm not going to spend any more than that on this desk, expecting to be bidding against Smithsonian. I got Ann Landers' desk for $198. And then I had all this extra money. And a lot of the other items in the auction that were coming up were awards and medals and honorary degrees that Ann Landers had been given over the 40-plus years that she wrote her advice column from the American Cancer Society, the American Lung Association, the American Society of Social Workers, all these awards, plaques, honorary degrees. So I started buying them. And I bought about 50 of them. And they're all over my house. Because 12 years ago, or 10 years ago when this auction was, I figured, if I ever want to get an award for writing an advice column, this is my only chance. Because they don't give awards to people who write advice columns who use dirty words and make dirty jokes and write about dirty sex acts. As a way, sort of, to pivot, I often felt I was writing in a dirty way, in a funny way, the way that people actually speak to their friends when they talk about sex, as opposed to the kind of sexual Sanskrit that you were required to write in publicly, or if you went into print about sex prior to my column's arrival. So I'm never going to get an award myself. So I was going to take Ann Landers' awards. And I have them at home, including awards from the Boy Scouts of America, which is So in a way, it's healing and meaningful for me to accept this award, particularly from this organization that I admire so much, and your cause that I admire so much, and that I believe that I am a part of. I was just at a university in South Carolina to speak, and when I speak, I do this Savage Love Live. People submit questions on cards, and whenever I go to the South or the Bible Belt, invariably in the cards with the other questions about sex problems or relationship problems, someone will ask, do you believe in God? And my shtick in these colleges is I get to that question in the South and the Bible Belt, do you believe in God? And I read it and I go, no. And then I go on to the next question. Because I don't believe that that should be a controversial thing to say or something you should necessarily have to unpack or explain or justify at great length. And then, usually in the live Q&A after, someone will ask me to go into it, which I will do. But I do not need to do here, because this is not the University of South Carolina. I am an unlikely humanist. I was raised Catholic. My dad was a Catholic deacon, the first in the ordained permanent Catholic diaconate, which was their desperate effort to stop the flow of priests leaving the priesthood. My mom was a Catholic lay minister. I was a seminarian. And thank you, Marty, for that generous and hilarious introduction. Unpacked, it was sometimes, I often speak of how my sexuality brought me into conflict with my faith, and thank God for my sexuality, if it was my sexuality that took me away from superstition and irrational belief. But I was speaking with my friend Andrew Sullivan, whose sexuality brought him into conflict with his faith, and yet who did not then leave his faith, just the other day, and I remembered an incident as we were speaking from much earlier in my childhood that I hope now, points to the fact that I would have, even if I wasn't gay, had seen through Catholicism and other irrational belief systems eventually. I remember very distinctly when I was 7 or 8 years old, looking at an illustrated world encyclopedia for children and seeing a procession up a Mayan temple of priests in robes and big crazy hats carrying weird things. And then turning the page a few pages back and seeing a procession of priests in ancient Egypt and thinking, this shit looks really familiar. It looks like Mass. I see my dad in these processions, and some other kid probably saw his dad in similar processions at Mayan temples and in ancient Egypt. And these people, I remember thinking, they probably believed whatever it was they were proceeding about with the same passion and fervor that my family believes what we proceed about in a Catholic church on a Sunday afternoon. And that was the beginning of my doubt, a doubt that would then one day be resolved very soon. What's the word? They've legalized pot in Washington State. Emphatically. We'll just stick with emphatically. Years later, when my sexuality gave me the coup de grace and ended it. Anyway, because I work in a Q&A format and it is my shtick, they said that they wanted me to take some questions and I should not run my mouth too long during my speech if we wanted to do some questions. If anyone has any questions, I will run my mouth in response to your questions. Any relationship problems you want to talk about in front of your spouse? A sore on your genitals you're having trouble identifying? I am here for you.
This is not relationship per se, but is it possible for a Republican to be a humanist?
God, I hope so. I'm sure there are some Republican humanists out there. I've met some Republican atheists, not quite humanists.
My brother's a right-wing Republican.
Your brother's a right-wing Republican?
Atheist.
Atheist. Well, there's hope for them then. We better hope that there can be more Republican humanists, because we're not going to be rid of Republicans. We're going to need a better class of Republicans at some point to help pull this country and the world out of the tailspin that it's in. Any other questions?
In your high school picture, which I thought was great, you had a button.
Oh, yeah.
What button was important to get in your high school picture?
Much to my mother's consternation at the time, it's a button, and when you see the actual picture, you can read it very clearly, and it says, "You are cordially invited to go fuck yourself." I was all over the F-bombs before I started writing my column. And my mother was angry because then she couldn't send the picture to her friends and my grandparents. And I was just not into school and photos and proms and graduations. And I went and had that photo taken at my mother's insistence and under duress, and basically sabotaged it.
Dan Savage.
Where are we?
Your old friend from Seattle, Ben E. Factory.
Oh, hey.
Hey, so I just didn't know that you had your own bisexual story as well, and I remember all the shit we used to get into over bisexuality being a phase, and now I have a wholly different sense, and it's so great to see you here, and congratulations. And thank you for all the great work you've done. I remember all the work we did on AIDS prevention education back in Seattle, and
Back in the
honestly,
day.
you've been an inspiration.
Well, thank you very much.
For
It's sweet of you to say.
so many people, and it's just so great to see you here, so congratulations.
Thank you. It's sweet of you to say.
Hi, Dan. I was wondering if you could talk to us about your negative opinions and negative comments on bisexuality and how participating in the systematic erasure of a legitimate sexual identity by using the same rhetoric that straight people use to talk down to queer people and religious people use to talk down to secular people is helpful to the LGBTQI community.
You left TS and LF off LGBTQI. And on behalf of the two-spirited and mother fetish communities, I'd like to condemn that erasure. There's a whole chapter in my new book about bisexuality, 8,000 words about bisexuality, where I unpack just this issue. I think you'll be really happy after you read it. I started writing Savage Love when I was 26 years old, and I don't think most people when they're 26 years old know their holes from asses in the ground quite entirely. And I trafficked in some what I thought were jokes and asides that some people were really angry about. And then there was that 2006 New York Times, this is going to bore the hell out of everybody but you, 2006 New York Times article about the study at Northwestern University that failed to document bisexual arousal patterns in males, conducted by Michael Bailey and others at Northwestern. And it confirmed what so many people, including me, had always joked about and said, that there's no such thing as a bi guy, no such thing as bisexual men. And a lot of people wrote about it, I wrote about it, we ran with it. And what's weird about being called biphobic, particularly in the wake of that study and the one that followed it, is the points that I often made about bisexuality that got me accused of being biphobic was that for many of us it was a phase. That I identified as bi before I came out as gay. This is common to the gay and lesbian experience. Many gay and lesbian adults, briefly in their lives, identified as bi before coming out as gay and lesbian, because it was easier for our friends and family to hear. Now, that leaves an adult gay man. When you meet somebody who's 35 years old who tells you he's bi, you're like, yeah, you're bi. I get it, right? You're bi. But when you meet a 16-year-old boy who tells you he's bi, you think, yeah, so was I when I was your age. You don't say that shit out loud, but you can't help but think it. And that's the tragedy, or the unfairness, the really galling unfairness, I think, for actual bisexual people in that reaction and that reality that bisexuality is a phase for some of us as an identity, is that that's not bisexuals who create that disconnect and leave that doubt floating around. It's people who are gay who lied about being bi when they weren't. And then bisexuals have to live with that it's a phase thing forever because some of us lied, as I did, about being bi. And so setting that aside, the 2006 study at Northwestern University that failed to document bisexual arousal patterns in males, it's a famous study. They took gay men, straight men, and bi-identified men, and lesbian women, straight women, and bi-identified women, and they showed them all gay, bi, and lesbian, gay, bi, and straight porn. And the women, lesbian, bi, straight, responded to all the porn. Whatever it was that aroused women. But when they showed the gay and straight porn to the gay, bi, and straight identified men, the straight identified men responded positively to the straight porn, the gay men responded to the gay porn, and the bi guys in the study responded to the gay porn, but not the straight porn. And this is why this was reported as evidence that assholes like me who had said forever that there's no such thing as a bi guy were right. They recreated that study years later, recently, and I write about this at great length in my book, and I'm talking about it at great length now. They recreated that study, and they controlled for something, and in the controlling for this something that I'll talk about in a second, they were able to identify bisexual arousal patterns in males. So they redid the study, and they showed that porn to gay, bi, and straight identified men. They showed the gay porn and the straight porn. And the straight guys in the new study responded to the straight porn, the gay identified guys responded to the gay porn, and the bi identified guys responded in the new study to the straight porn and the gay porn. So they found it. How did they find it this time? Well, they controlled for something that I get accused of being biphobic for saying is a thing that happens. They controlled for people who are lying about being bi. 53% of the people who self-identified as bi to take part in the study were eliminated because the researchers didn't believe them when they said that they were bi. And it was only by controlling for this that some young people who are identified as bi are transitioning to a lesbian or gay truth or identity are out there. And so it's funny, it's funny to have this thrown at me that I'm biphobic when only after the things that I had identified as things that happen, that some people who are bi-identified are not, like I wasn't, only when they controlled for that were they able to come up with the definitive proof that bisexual arousal patterns in males definitely existed. So I don't hate bi people, and I'm not biphobic. I like bi people so much I wish there were a lot more of them. Another thing that happens is a lot of bi people default into a kind of bisexual invisibility that is not the fault of straight people or gay people or lesbians or anybody else. If you're a bisexual person with an opposite sex partner who does not actively identify as bi, you disappear into presumed heterosexuality or perceived heterosexuality. We know there are 3 times as many bisexual women as there are lesbians. If all of those women were out to their friends and family, things would be better. There'd be less bisexual invisibility, more bisexual visibility, but also less anti-LGBT prejudice for everybody, bisexual, gay, lesbian, and trans. And I'm always importuning people in my column who are bi to be out about being bi, because it will undo that biphobia and that bi-invisibility that is indeed a problem for the bisexual community. And early on in writing my column, I did contribute to. And I think if you read that chapter in my book, you'll be very satisfied by the things I have to say about it.
Also, so you're Catholic.
Pardon?
So you say you're Catholic, or you were Catholic.
I actually say I am Catholic just to drive Catholics crazy.
Oh, I get it. So you're the one that we have to blame for tonight's Catholic appropriate Friday dinner.
Yes, I am the one. I said I'm not coming if you don't serve fish. Okay.
Dan, could you explain to us what is the bottom line for what you think is a healthy sexual ethic for everyone?
A healthy sexual ethic, the bottom line is consent. The bottom line is also, and I'm glad I'm not the first person to trot this phrase out tonight, do unto others as you would have them do unto you, which in the context of my column can have all sorts of different meanings. Consent makes a sex act or sexual relationship legitimate and doesn't necessarily make it healthy. You also have to examine the choices you're making. You have to question the health implications of the choices you're making, the mental state of your partner. But consent, I think, is the bedrock. If 2 people are doing it and they enjoy it and gives both pleasure and neither are being harmed by it, and they've thought it through and its implications, then it is absolutely moral in every respect. It is a good for them, for the pleasure it creates for them, and also then for the wider culture, because the more people who are happy and content and sexually satisfied and partnered up, even if that partnership only lasts an hour, the chiller and more relaxed and more centered and content a society we will all live in. So for me, always consent. Consent is the beginning, the middle, and the end of sexual ethics. I can kill someone with that. Wow.
Let's give them another round.